And now, live from Chicago, here is the Black Knight of Talk Radio, James Arthur Jancik.
Our next guest, Alan Watt, has been here before several times. He is a researcher, historian, and teacher. He's a long-term researcher into the causative forces behind the major changes in historical development. Born in Scotland, he watched the subtleties of politics and media as they guided the population of the UK covertly into the European amalgamation. He has been warning of the North American people for some time now that the same process of amalgamation is being carried out. With historical documentation, he shows how cultures are created and altered by those in control, always to lead people like sheep into the next pasture. Learn the science of religion, creationism, dominationism, rather than simply stating current events details. Alan attempts to deprogram the listener and the reader of his works. He has authored 3 books, made available as CDs and DVDs on his website, which is cuttingthroughthematrix.com. And welcome back to Feet to the Fire, Alan.
Don.
Now, we've had requests time and time to have you come back because you have a very clear, not only are you prepared with a clean understanding of history, but you were able to kind of peer through the muck and call the call like it is. And we are living in a time of flux and muck. What are some of the things that are on your mind at this current moment of what's happening in the world?
It's almost like deja vu when you understand how the past occurred and how populations were guided through major changes. And you see the same techniques being brought forth today, only with more sciences behind them, more communications to propagate it to the public. And you watch what's happening to the public. They're behaving exactly as you expected them to behave. And yet we're going through the greatest changes probably we've had for thousands of years as they move us into the complete electronically controlled society, which will eventually mean that you have no privacy whatsoever. Folk are already adapting to it very, very quickly. And the next step, of course, is no secret. They're talking about chipping people and ultimately merging you with a sort of cyborg-type creature. That'll be the new type of human. This is what they used to call the Great Leap Forward. This is the little sort of covert way they used to phrase it amongst themselves at the top. They knew themselves that anything to do with evolution would have to be man-made. But they seemed to know a long time ago that through the sciences they could make it happen and bring it forth. And, of course, with the proper shepherding, the sheep will go right through to the next pasture without even noticing how it happened. Or even as it does happen, they don't question it.
I must admit that I did have some hope, and I guess I still have some, but I was very impressed with Ron Paul coming on the scene, and what he was saying seemed to be pretty from his heart. It seemed very simple. There was a groundswell of people. Millions of dollars were given by hundreds of thousands of people, and I knew the media blocked them out, but I still kind of had a hope that they may be able to cut through. But apparently there's not enough people ready enough to make that stand.
It wouldn't matter if everybody was ready. The big boys put in who they want to put in because politics isn't real.
Do you think there's any I mean, they have that much of a control that there's no chance of real votes being counted really because maybe they didn't...
It was like Stalin said it. Stalin said, I don't care who votes for whom. He says, I only care who does the counting.
Right, well, yeah.
I mean, this is an old trick, and Professor Carl Quigley made it quite plain. And he was not just a simple professor. I mean, this man was an advisor to different presidents and the State Department and the diplomatic service and so on. This man put in his own book, Tragedy and Hope, and the Anglo-American Establishment, excellent two books to get. He said the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a parallel government, by the way, that's a real government, he said, we always put our own people in at the top of every party. Now that means that the lesser politicians, the ones who are just working their way up, are allowed a certain amount of competition at the bottom level, but he says it makes no difference because as long as you have the top people for candidates, they all belong to the same organization for world government. That was always the plan.
So do you think that as we look into these presidential race, that is there already a chosen one? Is Obama coming into it? Or will he be absorbed, or is he out?
Well, I think probably. I mean, I'm waiting to see them put Hillary in for the final push, because generally throughout history, when they're making catastrophic changes, in days gone by, they always gave us the female queen for the bloodiest periods. So the female always takes the heat. And I'm just waiting to see when they'll put her in, because she's been groomed for this position for a long time.
Well, yeah, that's a good point now, that these leaders are used by the behind the scenes. Is the behind the scenes guys ever come out in the light of day and say, here I am? Or do they always lead from behind, or is that the final
Well,
push?
one day they will come forth. They've said that in their own books, in fact. Because we know, for instance, the establishment, like the House of Lords, for instance, the noble families of Britain backed Theosophy when it first came out in the 1800s, with Madame Blavatsky being the actress and who led the charge and who was picked. And we know that the ones who took over were related, their fathers were members of the House of Lords, so they were hereditary lords from noble families. And they said that eventually the hidden masters, as they called them, would come forth at the right time when everything was complete. And we also know from Carroll Quigley, when he talks about how the system really does work, the show of politics for the public, it's just a show, it's a wrestling match between parties, and we get caught up in it like it's a real boxing contest, and even use sports terminology. They're running, they're racing, they're hammering so-and-so, and we get caught up in that. It's tribal instinct, and we're just played like fish on a line. Howard Quigley said himself that those behind the scenes, the technocrats he called them, and he defined what he meant by that. These are the ones who are unelected, who are financed by the big institutions which front for this whole organization, this world organization. We think of them as being charitable institutions like the Rockefeller Foundation, for instance, but they actually fund hundreds and hundreds of non-governmental organizations, and they put their technocrats in and out of politics as appointed advisors, not elected. And when they're not in politics, they're actually going around the globe carrying the real power. That's what Quigley said. So they have the knowledge that they're doing the real work and that they have the power to do it, and they're not answerable to any public, while the politicians simply take the heat and go through the performance to please the public.
So, yeah, if it ever gets to the point, there's a politician ready to take the fall, and they have someone else groomed to come in to be the hero or the savior, which is just another one of them.
Yeah, it's an endless cycle, and they knew this in the 1700s in countries like England, that if they did not give the public some Punch and Judy show, and that's what politics is, there'd be revolutions every 5 years or so. So they give us elections instead. And we don't really vote new people in. We're so disgusted at the present bunch, we vote them out. That's what we really do in democracy.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And nothing changes. The agenda steamrolls ahead, because when you go into the writings of the League of Nations, when they set up the League of Nations at the end of World War I, and it had been in the planning for 50 years before that, again by the nobility. And H.G. Wells was a propagandist for the British Crown. And he wrote a booklet on the League of Nations, and he said at last, he said, we can bypass politicians completely and governments completely, because now the high bureaucracies, who again are unelected, remember, can travel and meet their counterparts in the League of Nations, which turned into the United Nations, and they can bypass all politicians. And each bureaucracy has its own particular mandate, intergenerational mandates, and they're not responsible to the public, who are generally unaware of what they're actually doing.
I got email from an individual. What I like is the synchronicity in which I get stuff from people. It comes out, and then this email will hook up with that email and come up with a third thing unrelated to either one, I mean directly anyway. And I got an email from a guy about John Todd. Are you familiar with him?
Jack who?
John Todd, T-O-O-D.
Refresh my memory.
I never heard of him myself, but he was a alleged Illuminatist who got saved and toured around exposing the Illuminati. And the way the legend is, well, I shouldn't say that. The way the information I got was that he was arrested and convicted or sentenced for being crazy, and he just disappeared into the mental health system and never heard from him again. But there are information left behind, and they sent me some of these MP3s to listen to. And he mentioned about another book that I got from another email, Atlantis, Atlas Shrugs.
Oh, yeah.
And as being the Illuminati kind of handbook. And I'm thinking, well, these two emails come in unrelated from one another, from people who listen. And
yeah.
So,
well, I mean, Ayn Rand, or as she called herself, that wasn't her real name, was sent out. It's really interesting how it's all to do with perceptions. That's how the tricks work. And she said a lot of things that the individualistic, especially the American, would relate to do with rights and individual rights, and why should the masses hold you down type of deal. And she was against socialism. However, when you see that, she was actually talking about the elite themselves from the other side of the fence. She was basically saying that the elite, the people like her lover, the Rothschild, had the right, the geniuses had the right to dominate the lesser people and do as they wish and plan the world in the future as they wish. That's what she was really saying. And yet most of her followers were pretty well ordinary middle-class people who saw it from their point of view, thinking she was talking on behalf of them.
So this John Todd was from the 70s, I guess it was. I'm trying to put it all together. I just found it interesting that these two came in from different listeners. I mean, people have sent emails before. It wasn't like there was some kind of a third party doing it. Is that, I mean, should I drive a lot during the week, and I did find the book on CD of this Atlas Shrugs. Would it be worth my while to read it, or I should say listen to it?
Oh yeah, I'd read all of her books actually, because if you're able, and most folk are not, unfortunately, they get caught into books or movies and they see it from one perspective. They don't see it from other perspectives as well. And if you're able to jump from being who you are to putting yourself in the position of one of the true elites, the wealthy magnates of the world, you'll see that she's actually speaking on behalf of them.
Okay, well that'd be good to go in with that perspective right off the bat. Because another thing I wanted to ask, another thing that came up just this week, I was listening to some Dean Brown books, and I had a little light go on that I noticed in these books. In particular, I was listening to Angels and Demons and The Deception Point. And in The Deception Point, he mentioned the Roswell incident, but the way it was written in the script, it was like, well, you know, the Roswell incident, actually it was a high-tech balloon, and some fireman thought it was aliens, and the government went along with that cover story, et cetera.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a lot of evidence that it wasn't a balloon, and that their highest echelon pilots are the ones that found it, not just a farmer and so on. And then I started wondering, with his talk about saying the Illuminati don't exist anymore in his other book, I started to wonder, you know, if anybody was an Illuminati, it'd be this guy. You know anything about Dan Brown?
No, I don't. I know there's been a lot of people come out in the past, made a lot of money, and used pseudonyms and claimed they were an Illuminati. However, you've got to understand that what it really means. Most folk don't know what it means. I think it's some very, very hidden conspiracy. Illuminati is a graduated system, and everyone who goes through university, in fact, becomes a member of the alumni, the illumined one, you see. Mm-hmm. So every step of it is just a graduated system where you do your part according to your understanding within that system. And then you go up the ladder and up the ladder till you have those who are interbred at the top, the real interbred families who ran the world for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, who do control the wealth of the world. Their ancestors were kings and queens and lords and so on. And they owned the mercantile system, and they had huge banking systems as well. And often they had their own frontmen for the bankers, they still do. So these are very wealthy families, and you can find a lot of them came into Europe with a religion. They always bring a religion in for the public to make them docile. the Catholic Church came in through Europe. They used Charlemagne as the first king authorized by the Vatican to slaughter everybody who would not become a Catholic. Through country after country, the great Charlemagne. And that's how they converted them. And then later on, of course, came the big flood centuries later, and they were the Normans. The Normans were the real ones. And the descendants of the Normans all across Europe and Scandinavia still run those countries today and are still the titled people.
So what he did in the one book, Angels and Demons, is kind of said that the whole Illuminati thing started with Galileo, et cetera, and it died out years ago. And it kind of went in stark contrast to the behind-the-scenes thing. So perhaps the Illuminati picture that's painted by a number of these individuals who've made movies and exposés and all that is a bit of fiction or a cover?
Well, at one time, you see, not so long ago, you got to remember, you couldn't speak out against the overwhelming system that ran the Europe, for instance, the whole of Europe and other parts of the world, and that was the great church itself. That was the authority. And so the secret societies that basically surfaced in the 1500s in countries like England for the first time more openly when they had the right queen in who had accepted it. Now the Queen Elizabeth I, she had the first openly Rosicrucian court. All of her advisors were Rosicrucians. So they could speak more openly about it. John Dee, Francis Bacon, all of the well-known names. Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake, all these characters were members of the Rosicrucian Society, which evolved into the branches of Freemasonry, specialized branches later on. And they also call themselves, from the 1500s onwards, if you look at the old Oxford dictionaries, it'll tell you that Illuminati is a term used for these particular fraternities, they call them brotherhoods, which emerged first around the 1500s.
So it
but did not begin with Weishaupt, you know.
What does the word Illuminati mean today? I mean, not the history, but you know, what is the Illuminati today?
Today, there's different meanings. There's one for the general masses, which is a new. Now you live in a transformed society where the old religion is gone, and almost gone, and they bring in the new religion, which is called the New Age movement. The New Age movement has 1,000 names, and people don't even know they're in it often. They'll join some club or organization or meditation group or whatever, and they're actually in one of the New Age movement groups. So part of the whole New Age movement, if you go through it, doesn't matter what it's called, because in old Babylon, which they copied it after, they said that Isis was a goddess with 1,000 names and 1,000 faces, and it's the same today. But it's basically forms of Hinduism mixed with other old bits and pieces of religions, and it's put together under the New Age term. And the whole process is to get you eventually into visualization, then channeling, which is bringing an entity into you. And during that process, that's when you receive the light, as they call it, illumined. You have the light, you know. And Albert Pike mentioned it, even Blavatsky mentioned it in 1800. He says, you know, the fire and the light of Lucifer. And her first newspaper for the officer was called the Luciferian Magazine. Eventually they changed it to Lucas Trust. So they were quite open about Lucifer being, for the masses, of course, they would sort of cross their fingers and throw holy water, but to them it meant ultimate intellect and godhood.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes along with what we'll say what Dan Brown says, except he had him being extinct, and that's where I think he may be actually trying to pass that off, like this whole thing was all Illuminati was all back then, but now we're all together and we're all nice, and so the new Illuminati would be, we'll say in a word, the New Age?
The New Age, and the ones who gave them the New Age, because the magazine that first used the term was the official magazine of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. That was their monthly magazine. It was called The New Age in the 1950s. And in there, one of their editions, or a few of their editions, they actually said that they would be responsible for ushering in the New Age. and they meant the whole movement as well. And because at the top of high masonry, the really high masonry, you have people who have access to archives. They can recreate religions or make brand new religions because they know how the masses function and how the masses follow and what the masses want as well. And so the whole idea was to bring in a new religion for a new era, which would captivate their minds just with the same fire as early Christianity would do. And it would also make them very docile, but with this particular movement of the New Age, it would make them incredibly hedonistic, self-centered, and narcissistic. The same things that Lord Bertrand Russell said they would promote was hedonism. Because a society full of people who are into purring like cats will not notice the vast changes that are being made around them as it's happening. And that's what you have. In the New Age movement, they're taught not to look at the negative, so they're defenseless, you see.
Right, okay.
And that's the purpose of it.
You mentioned a couple of phrases that reminded me. I had before the show started, Stephen from Scotland sent a message to ask a question. Can Alan explain the link between the ancient and accepted Order Scottish Rite, a.k.a. Supreme Council of the 33rd degree, and the Scottish Rite of America?
Yeah, well, actually, in actual fact, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is not Scottish. It was brought over to America from France by one man. And I think he first came in through Cuba and then went into the States. And its whole function from the beginning was to give it an increased level of degree system, and it would also be a revolutionary force, which it certainly is. It's a revolutionary force. And the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is accepted by the Grand Lodge of England. Now, at first they disowned it. And Albert Pike, who was one of the most famous Grand Masters, he was the Pope, really, of Masonry, they called him, did train Mazzini, one of the revolutionists who went over to Italy. The whole idea was to set revolution across the whole of Europe. And they sent out different groups who were funded by big institutions as well. And Mazzini started off the World Revolutionary Party, which eventually was taken over by his successor, that was Lenin. They called it the World Revolutionary Party, and then the Communist Party.
Well, that does sound, it sounds kind of funny, because it sounds like, well, on one hand, this is what it is, and you do have the, the background for it, but it sounds like it's almost like a bait and switch, where here's what it is, this kind of mystical type of a thing, and then on the other hand, it's really all about control.
It's all about control. You see, the plan of unification of the world is not new. And they wanted to bring in their own order across the world. Under the guise, you always get the masses to fight for you, fight your battles for you. And so they used the ordinary people. They created the term socialism, even Blavatsky was pushing that. And the whole idea was to get the masses behind them for revolution, to wipe out the old system. To get centralized government was very important, because before you can unify nations, you must have centralized government in every one. And that was the reason for the World Revolutionary Party that became the Communist Party. Lincoln did the same back in the U.S. He centralized the government, getting more power than it ever had before. And Marx even set up a telegraph and congratulated him for doing it. This was all working together to centralize governments that would then use scientific techniques for controlling the masses, as opposed to just nothing but religious techniques. And that's where we are today. We're getting to the end of a long lead plan. And from the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, when you go up the ladder of Masonry, you go into eugenics. It starts to become evident to people you're into eugenics. That's where Hitler got his idea, that Blavatsky was pushing it, promoting it. In fact, that was their symbol for a long time in Theosophy, was the swastika, and below it was what people now think of as the Star of David. And the whole idea was basically eugenics, and the Hinduistic belief, which suited them very well, that at the end of an age, the masses, the lesser, those who are unfit, are purged off the planet, and only the fit come through. And if you look at the whole world today with eugenics and so on and what they're talking about in newspapers, euthanasia is now official in 3 countries in Europe. They want to bring it across the world. We're aborting more children than we're giving live births. The only reason stats go up in censuses every year is because of the mass immigration from other countries. But they're trying to get the impression we're overcrowded because they want to start to eliminate the useless eaters, as Lord Bertrand Russell called them.
Well, as I see that all triangulating, everywhere you go, whether it be the Mayan calendar, whether it be the Christian, the Return of Christ, or the New Age, or whether it's, aliens are going to come and help us all learn, all these things, looking through those eyes, are all part of the same deal.
They're all part of the same deal. The whole idea of ancient times was to give prophecy, which would... if that's all that you knew was the little bit of religion you were taught, you couldn't read or write, remember. Most folk couldn't read or write until the late 1800s, actually into the 1900s. Only those with a good education could read and write from wealthier families. And if all you were taught was your religion, and you're taught that it's based on prophecy, well, when things started to happen in your life, you'd think that was God's will, because it was written about and you'd heard about it. And what can you do against God's will? So you allowed it to happen. You wouldn't even fight against it. So prophecy is fantastic for that. When they brought in the Rosicrucian movement, they gave them the same thing, only they gave it through tarot cards and the stars and so on. You can't change fate as written in the stars, and folk would sit back and allow things to happen just as they are today.
So there really is no choice but for us to get off our laurels and do something, or... Is it really a point of just being aware of this end coming, or can we actually do something about it?
When you realize the amount of people who control the public, all of the institutions and police and military, educational system, incredibly important for them is the educational system, is indoctrinate the children into the next step of what they're going to believe for the rest of their lives. There's still billions of people on the planet who allow this to happen. It's like the old stage shows used to say at the very end, thank you to the audience. We couldn't have done it without you. Well, see, we're the audience, and we should be participating in our own destiny here, because we know where it's going. It's getting published every day where it's going. We see the laws getting passed every day. We'll watch them for 8 years now. And it's just accelerating until we're going to be locked in our own little rooms and monitored 24 hours a day. I don't call that living. Getting probed in an airport and told to bend over is not my idea of freedom.
No, it isn't, and it's rather disturbing, and that's why I like having you on here, is because sometimes I do catch myself getting caught up in hope, and I mean, hope isn't a bad thing, but if that's your answer, then we got a problem. It's going to be, perhaps hope may be some kind of a guidance, but there's got to be action. But I'm also...
There's no doubt about it. People have to get involved in their own destiny, and maybe for the first time, they've got to start taking the rights back for the people.
On that note, we have a question from Ben in the chat room saying, I'd like to know Alan's opinion on, quote, natural person and, quote, free man on the land, unquote, particularly with respect to the pros and cons, and how the coming world order will look upon this.
There's no doubt. Regardless of laws or legalisms or even terms, they're not recognizing them anymore. There were little loopholes in the past you could use according to your terms, like are you a person, natural person, all this stuff that lawyers do. Disregarding them now, and they're going to use force. They want the public off the land. That's been made quite clear. They want them crowded into the big existing cities, which will be the new type of Soylent Green type scenario, like the movie, and overcrowded, filthy, and so on. But only temporarily, as will die off through plagues and pandemics, which they will release. While they've already got huge sites out there by big companies advertising these ultra-new homes, modern homes in the country, maybe 12, 15 to an area where this is where the higher bureaucrats and those who run the world will live. Just like the Soviet system, they had the dash hours in the country for the higher members of the Politburo. It's going to be the same scenario here. They want everyone in these new, what they call habitat areas. That's where you will live for the rest of your life. And, but they plan on reducing the population drastically. And if you want plagues that to be effective, you want them all in the same crowded cities.
That's
so
true.
they will get people off the land. And with the Kyoto signatories already completed, you're going to see now the implementation of all these ridiculous taxes, which will tax us into the ground until you cannot travel anymore, because part of the mandate is as well under the United Nations, by the way, who pushes all this stuff out, is that in the habitat areas that are coming up, there will be no personal transportation, no private transportation of any kind.
Yeah, what dawned in my head a couple of years ago was the surface idea of, say, Monsanto making you go back to get their corn from them. I mean, that seems like a capitalist type of a trick, but what I came beyond that was, well, now they can just put a disease out to destroy a huge portion of the world's food because it's genetically altered to be a certain way, and of course there's a back door, if you will, to that gene code, and they could just wipe out entire continents of food.
Yes, they could. It's so easy now. The odd thing, I guess it means the sensible thing to do, when you look back in the old books from the World War II and the declassified information that came out after World War II, to do with all the methods of defeating an enemy in warfare, and apart from the economic war, you'd also go for all their food supply and water supply. And they were talking then that all of the diseases they had for crops would not be completely effective because of the vast variety of strains of crops. However, you're quite right, with the maybe 5 companies, which are probably all really one company at the top, controlling the world's grain supply, one disease could technically wipe them out. The public will think there's nothing they can do about it, and it won't dawn on them that this was actually made to be this way, as we all go under quietly.
What about these swine flu and bird flus? They're all scaring us with this stuff, but nothing happens. Is that preparing us for the real one? That, oh, see, I told you? Or?
Yes, we first saw it with when a movie came out called Outbreak years ago. I knew then that was the start of getting us ready by predictive programming, so that subconsciously they'll start to gradually accept this, not just a possibility, but inevitability. And even all the newspaper clippings I've collected over the years, when I talk to the great experts on this topic that are paid to work in warfare laboratories generally, they say, oh, the plague is just around the corner, it's inevitable. So they've been pushing that and pushing that. You notice that the West Nile virus has gone out the window. That was going to be the great killer. However, it's done its job. It got us all ready to accept the possibility of contracting a fatal disease and dying. And then they went through SARS in Toronto, a great experiment there. And that was ethno-specific, though it attacked mainly people of Chinese descendancy. And then we've moved on from there. So these are all predictive programming methods they're using to familiarize us with the possibility and the inevitability of the idea.
Well, what do you think? I mean, I'm sitting now going like, okay, it's over, and nice talking with you. I mean, but it's like, there's got to be, there's got to be an answer, and I can't accept.
The answer can only come from the will of people.
But do you
it can
think
only come from the will of people not to be such pathetic, indoctrinated sheep anymore. And if you actually, as a sovereign individual, and many sovereign individuals, you have the right to decide your fate in this world just as much as any king, queen, or Mr. Brzezinski or anybody else. They have no more right than you do.
Well, okay, I agree. And isn't there some type of manipulated or shunned inner power that's been not just our intellect, but like some kind of a sixth sense, a real one, I mean, inside creative type of a brand of, like, we'll call it where spirituality meets science in quantum mechanics, where we can actually create the future? I mean, is there something like that, or is that all just baloney too?
Well, that's what Blavatsky said. I mean, she was part of the whole thing. She said that our purpose is to blend the possibility for the people meant to believe of spirit and science until the two will be indistinguishable. We are run by sciences. Even the New Age movement is run by sciences. And the public don't realize it. And it takes more than that. You've got to have will to do something. And it means becoming completely conscious as a conscious being and thinking for yourself outside the box. But any mass movement you join has been put out there for you to join. There's different types of groups for different personality types. It's all totally controlled and well funded, by the way, you know. And you'd be surprised how interconnected all of these big groups are, including the ones who come out supposedly lead you into a spiritual life. So you have to think for yourself and go through your history and see what changes happened in the past, who did it, what kind of people made the right changes, and you'll find it did not come from any group that was sitting wishing their lives away, holding hands and pulling daisies, you know.
No, I would agree. In fact, one of the things as I look back on is that I've always been kind of allergic to groups, to authority, to people telling me this is how it is. There's just this inside going like, no, I mean, I got to know why, I got to see the mechanism, I got to see the stuff behind it. And when I hear things, especially when you're bringing out these aspects of certain books and so forth I didn't read in histories, it's like, oh, yeah, you know. So there's got to be there's got to be an answer that's not tied into any groups. However, these groups, in order to get power, must be telling some truths. There might be some things mixed in there that we can distill out and use for ourselves.
You can. It's almost like it's like putting powder on water on gunpowder. You can't blend the two together because one is contrary to the other in the whole movement of spirituality. The whole modern idea, which again is modern, and it was put out deliberately, well-financed from the top and promoted from the top, like all culture is, was meant to make people hedonistic. As long as they're hedonistic and narcissistic, they will not care. And you see all around you, they don't care what's happening across the world. They don't even care their tax money is being used to make high weaponry. It's not only blowing people up in the Middle East, it's going to be used shortly on the public here. That's in the Guardian newspaper. I read the whole 9-page report. There's 90 pages altogether on the Ministry of Defense. They see nothing but 30 years of riot starting very shortly and escalating, and they're even prepared to use neutrino bombs on the public. That's in the official NATO Army document. Now, what on earth is going to happen to the public to make them rise up, throw that television away, and actually do something or start rioting? And what will happen is they're going to turn off your food supply now and then, your water supply. They're going for them all the time. You'll notice that. They're going for everything that gives you independence, because the world they're bringing in is going to be interdependent. That means right down to the individual. Every need you have for survival and living is going to be dependent on being in a system that controls you. You won't even be able to grow your own food eventually. That's on the cards. They want you interdependent as a slave to the system. So when people realize that there's going to be rioting, they start losing all the little toys or goodies, and they can't play and watch TV all day. That's when the riots will start. When the money stops, when money goes through the roof or inflation goes through the roof, which is planned that way, they expect the rioting. But that's from the top think tank for the British Army Department of Defense.
And of course, the rioting would just play right in their plan to be the destructive mechanism to thin out the herd, if you will.
Yes. And they've been building up an internal army under the guise of war on drugs and war on this and war on that. Now it's war on terror by training police forces and as a paramilitary organization and giving them special training with machine guns and all the rest. When your police start training with machine guns, you're in big trouble.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the '68 riot in Chicago. And what the police were using, the shield and a stick, versus the SWAT teams they got now that come right out of special ops of the military.
Yes, and they also have a generation who've been groomed, whom they've got their whole education and the reality not from their parents but from the school system and that's what Bertrand Russell said they'd do. Eventually the state would give them their values. They've been brought up on video games, something that was developed for the military industrial complex and by them to train soldiers to kill, because it's abnormal for guys. You have to train them to actually kill by basically instinct without thinking, and that's what video games were designed to do. Were used in the military for years before the public got them. But there isn't a generation like that, and those children grew up playing those games where the whole object is kill, 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 and get out to the other side. There's no morality of any kind, and they've been brought up with nothing but war games, and their heroes on television are always the military guys or the guys in black uniforms within society. These are the guys with power. Children gravitate to the winners, and that's what they wanted. Now they are wearing the uniforms, and they will use the toys they're given on the public.
So the people who are going into schools and shooting people, some people are claiming some kind of a big mind control deal. It could just be the fruits of the labors of what you're just saying.
It could be definitely part of it, there's no doubt. You cannot give that kind of military gaming, which is a teaching tool, to make you lose your natural inhibitions to killing people. You can't give that to children, advocate that, and it's made to be addictive, by the way. We know that from the Japanese, who are probably the world's leaders in creating addictive type programs. And you cannot give them, remember, all television, all drama, all series to do with police and military and so on is propaganda. It always is, dressed up with human little stories to keep you hooked as you get downloaded with the respect that you're given for these guys at the top with their outfits and uniforms. That's what Jacques Ellul said. He said all entertainment at that level to do with military, with police, detectives and so on, and the law courts is always propaganda. You don't realize it. So they've had 20 years of massive propaganda, starting with, was it NYPD Blue, I think it was, with the SWAT teams, and simply escalating from there until you can't turn the television on without seeing guys in black outfits smashing through windows. And it's all quite normal now. And now they have the uniforms on, guys who are 18 and 20 who will do that, thinking it is quite normal. They learned it all from the TV, from their heroes, the fictional heroes. This is all deliberate. Because the future doesn't just happen by chance. The present didn't happen by chance. Culture creation and the culture creation industry gave us today's society.
Yeah, I see it in quite clear clarity. Gosh, I got some kind of hope. I mean, I don't mean hope like sitting in my hind end and hoping. I mean, I'm doing what I can to bring people on to talk and learn and try to weed out, phony spirituality from real power, internal power, and looking at the higher good of people, not the personal, narcissistic type of personal creation that they're talking like, the secret and all that is teaching people to try and use this higher good creative ability to make your own toys and money and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where do you give a suggestion to somebody who's waking up and going, okay, so what do we do?
They have to be more discerning than probably any generation in history. Because over the years, the last 10 years or so, those who did the real research to do with the banking system, the culture industry, all that stuff, stuck to the facts. Today, it's a big business. The Patriot business is a big business. They're making lots of money off it. And a lot of them have stuck it together with the whole New Age movement, with the UFOs, with everything else, until it's all surrealistic, and they can't determine fact from fiction or priority from those things that really don't matter. That was intentional, too, to diffuse the basic facts. It's the facts that are important. It's the facts that you act upon. And it's all mushed together and into a massive confusion now because the big boys have put out their own people to blend the New Age in with the whole Patriot business and discredit it.
So I'm I'm looking for, so I should start looking for a place in the mountains somewhere? I mean,
It certainly wouldn't harm. I'd rather be in the mountains than somewhere in any city.
Because it sounds like, I mean, what you're saying, I've heard you, we've talked before, and it's not that you're telling me necessarily things amazingly different. It's just, I just been sitting here and listening, and I had this kind of clear picture of this huge wall ahead of us that's been planned brick by brick for thousands of years. It's impenetrably thick. There's weapons we don't even know they have yet. They're all in it. We're all being herded down this pathway. And it's like, wait a minute. I don't want to go down this pathway.
That's right.
But it looks pretty overwhelming.
It is overwhelming until you start to, rather than do wishful thinking, you actually act on it. And that means everyone's got to stand up and stand out. This is not a time for those who are cowards. It's not a time for the fake ones who are out there just to make piles of money and to mislead the people as well. It's a time for those that know what's really going on to stand up and go to all the offices that they know in their own area and everywhere else and demand to know. Demand to know every organization, every politician, every bureaucrat belongs to. All the world and global organizations they've already given allegiance to. They cannot be sovereign and they cannot be international at the same time. You got to know what every woman and man belongs to that has power over you, including the cops too. That means every fraternity, every Masonic organization, and there's many names to it too, by the way. Look into all the organizations. There's hundreds of different names you would never suspect are actually Freemasonic institutions, male and female. And that should be out in the open because they're ruling us through an agenda. They know they don't want to rock the boat. They're looking for their own careers. That's all they care about. They think they'll be saved out of this morass of the public. In fact, I get a lot of information coming from federal and provincial state bureaucrats. And I know what they're up to. I know what's going on. And they are terrified themselves that maybe they'll be left out of the safety net, when their job is no longer necessary. So it's a time now to start exposing this because you either have public servants or you have masters. It's time the farce of them being servants is exposed once and for all while there's chance to do it. It has to be done, and the public have to demand it en masse.
And, well, since they are loaded with food bombs and water bombs and turning off electricity bombs, we do all that. They just say, well, it's a little earlier than expected, but I guess we're going to have to start the rioting.
They don't like it. These guys go, the reason it takes such a long time, intergenerational changes, remember what Beria said in the 30s at the Comintern meeting, International Communist meeting. He said it used to take 70 years to alter a major shift in the public perception of things. He said, now, that's back then. He says, now we can do it every 5 years. And eventually, he says, it'll become much quicker with scientific indoctrination. Well, what he meant that was they all knew TV would come out eventually. It didn't just suddenly appear. They knew this was coming up. Even Bertrand Russell knew that too, long before we heard of it. And they're going to use all the scientific tools to gear us towards this. And today, it's on our roll today. We have to start taking responsibilities for our own lives and stop allowing non-governmental organizations to dictate to the governments as to what they want, because all the NGOs, the official NGOs, and all the Greenies and all the rest of it that lobby the government, they're full-time lobbyists. These guys roll in millions of dollars and pretend they're grassroots organizations speaking for the public. They are not. They are not the public. They're taking over the role that the public used to have, and they're funded by the big institutions. Many of them are even paid by your tax money from the same governments that are lobbying for the radical changes that end up affecting all of us. The government pays them grants to lobby them. And we've looked through all the changes and the mayhem. We've watched the destruction of the family with a lot of the radicals who are paid by your governments and foundations to do that very thing. Then you tell me if that government's working for you.
Oh, that's clear it isn't. I mean, what I found, and give me an example in the show we do here. Every week we do a thing where people send in a name or they can put their own name in. for someone who's got ill or accident or what have you. And we put together an intention to send them energy for healing. You know, it sounds real new agey type of a thing, but it's based in the idea of what makes up matter is energy. And that if you can actually do this, you can intend for this to happen. And I have had so many people writing back, people who were dying of cancer. I had people referred to by other guests who knew about this, have completely been healed. There is some kind of a power there. I mean, I don't mean you could just will the government to be nice, but I mean, there's some kind of untapped inner power that they've been working on for years to enslave us. And is there like, you know, besides becoming aware that time is of the essence and this big wall's in front of us, it's almost like it's time to stand up like that clip we play, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore, and asserting some type of creative power just to stop it.
Well, there's creative power perhaps, but creative power is manifested through physical actions. And, I mean, I've seen all of the spiritual cons in the past. I've seen the boxes they sell even to collect the energy. And all of the different cons I've pulled in the past, and I've known all the testimonials that you chase them up and it's not true. We shouldn't be so easily fooled, and we do live in the most easily fooled generation that's probably ever existed, because we can't tell fact from fiction. Unfortunately, if there's spirit in a person, it must work through that person, and if it sits there and wishes and leaves it to others, it's doing nothing at all.
Well, that's true, and one thing we've noticed is the people who are participating in this, some people have gotten momentarily changing in their physical condition, but then they just slip back because they haven't done anything. And other people,
I could do the same. I could do the same right now, just by simple a few words, and that's just self-hypnosis. It's the same thing with the big characters, the televangelists that drip with gold. I'm sure you've seen them. Right. And they have someone who'll jump out of a wheelchair, and yeah, they do for 10 minutes. I could do the same thing with suggestion, hypnosis. And, you know, once the screen's gone, then those characters are back worse than ever. You can do an awful lot with autosuggestion.
Well, yeah, a lot of these people know. I mean, they were talking cure of cancer, wanted a doctor cancer-free. I mean, I guess they could be lying to me, but, you know. But
you also find a lot of people will exaggerate what they have. I've known people who go out to do a bit of gardening and then think they've got arthritis, they've got a sore wrist. Well, I don't care how old or young you are, you do a bit of gardening you haven't done for a year, you're going to have a sore wrist. And they'll swear they've got arthritis, and then this particular pill cured them. I mean, this is, again, suggestion to the people who don't get the diagnosis. And I've heard lots of these cases, but I've yet to see one in actual, and the evidence in a blind study.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe that's something I want to find truth. So I would love to be able to put something together. You talk about a blind study type thing. I've actually, when I put my kind of the feet to the fire, so to speak, and asked some of these remote viewers and whatnot to do some type of test, they always have some kind of an excuse to pull out of it.
Yeah, because it's a big money. I could be making millions today with what I do now to do with the occult, which is more than what you're going to hear from other people. And I could make lots and lots of money by giving the public what they want to hear, because number one, you have a ready-made audience in this day and age, because the new religion is the New Age movement. They're already there for you. They'll snap everything up. They make them go wow and ooh. And I could, if I had no heart at all or was psychopathic, I would. I'd just rake the money in and give them what they want to hear. It's no different. 100 years ago, any guy rolling into a small town in the USA, or even a large city who was well known, an evangelist there, could have them hopping and screaming and jumping and seeing the Lord and all the rest of it. You'll always have the same phenomena in religions. That's why they're created that way.